This is part 2 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 4 Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 1, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be continuing with the disassembly. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Continuing with the Quill spindle assembly, we'll remove the feed stop bracket. And then the Quill gasket. And then the Quill washer that sits under that gasket. And a link to, or a spreadsheet with all of these parts and links on where to get some of them if you're missing some of them is included in the description of this video. There's the washer. So I wanted to point out here, there is a retaining ring that holds the bearing in, and it's kind of deep inside the quill. So to get that retaining ring out, what we're going to do is use some long picks, because even though I have that awesome set of retaining ring pliers back there, none of them can get down in there. And I usually end up deforming that retaining ring like that, pulling it out, but I've got replacements, so it's not a big deal. So now there's nothing holding the spindle inside the quill except its force being leveraged on it by the bearing. So we can just smack it out of there. Then we've got to get that bearing out of the quill. So we're just going to use a wooden dowel, tap on it, and that bearing will come out. We're going to be replacing all of these ball bearings. Now, there is another retaining ring on this ball bearing. And this one you can use some retaining ring pliers to get it off. And there we go. And then to get that ball bearing off of the spindle, sometimes you can slide it off. It doesn't really want to move right now. So we're going to seat that bearing inside the quill and then drive the spindle through it. And then the bearing should just be right there. Easy peasy. So the last thing we're going to do is remove this quill retaining ring. And I just use two vice grips, a pair of vice grips, if you will, and lock on each side of where the split is in that retaining ring. And then we'll just spread the ring enough to lift it off of the quill. Next, we're going to be getting that pinion out of the hub. And if you've got a stuck pinion in a hub like this, this is how I do it. I use a brass rod. And I just start tapping the edge of the hub and moving it away from the pinion. I kind of work my way around it as I do it. Sorry, my hands are in the way. And this does mar up that edge a little bit, but it's not a huge issue. And there it is. Next, we're going to remove the adjustment panel that's inside the hub. And it's glued in there. So you just need to get behind it at a point where there's kind of a small gap in the glue, so you can start working it away with a scraper like this one. And when we go to reattach it, we'll be using double-sided tape. So no big deal. There it is. All right, so now let's try to get that machine screw out of the head casting. So if somebody has tried to remove this screw or remove the spindle pulley assembly without removing this screw, the screw may be bent or broken off on the inside. Now, I've got a video about why that is, and I'll link that here. But luckily, this one came out, and it was not bent, so it was just really rusted in there. Like everything else on this drill press, really rusted. So it's a machine thread, so it's really fine, so there's a lot of unscrewing to be done here. And I think I need to remagnetize my screwdrivers because none of them are picking it up. So what we'll do is just flip the head over and bang it a couple times, and that screw will fall out like that. So now that that machine screw is out, we can go ahead and remove the spindle pulley assembly. And for that, I just use a wooden dowel and a mallet. And we're just going to brace the wooden dowel on the bottom of the spindle pulley assembly and tap it out. There's two bearings, so the first one is out, and now we got to line that second bearing up with the bore and then drive it out. And it will come. There we go, starting to move. And there it is. So there's a retaining ring on the spindle pulley assembly that holds the bearings in place. We'll remove that. Boy, oh boy. There we go. That should be good. There it is. Now, sometimes you can just pull these bearings off, but like everything else on this drill press, nothing is going to be easy. So I'm going to use a puller. I'm going to use a socket and set that puller on there. We'll pull the bottom bearing off first, which is the highest one as we're looking at it here. And between these two bearings, there's a spacer, and that spacer normally just slides right off of there, but somebody has banged the side of the spacer somehow, and it's like stuck on the shaft. So we're going to have to pull the spacer and the bottom or the top bearing off at the same time. I'll show you. There's a spacer. See where it's divoted there? You should be able to just slide it off of there, but it's somebody's mashed it in somehow. So we'll just twist till we get all this off of there. Now, unlike your 100s and 150s, the shaft that the bearings are mounted on this spindle pulley assembly actually comes out of the pulley. So we'll be taking that apart as well. And there we go. And so there's a set screw that holds that shaft in place. And we'll remove the set screw. That spreadsheet that I said is in the description of the video. It has all your information about the bearings as well to replace the bearings. And there's your set screw. Use a little bit of PB blaster, and there we go. The shaft comes right out of there. So next we'll be uninstalling the power panel. It has a cover. So there's 4 screws here. 2 of them hold the cover in place, and then 2 of them hold the power panel in place. And all 4 of them should have lock washers under them. And the OEM screws should have been flat tip screws, but somebody had put some Phillips heads in 2 of them. So this flat tip screw here does not want to come out. So we get it out eventually. And there's your power panel with the light socket on it. So we can go ahead and fish the power cord out of the head. And the power panel obviously is connected to the switches on the front of the drill press head. So we're going to have to disassemble that switch panel and the switches to be able to get everything out. So there are 4 screws that hold the part of the panel in place. It's just the part of the panel that has the writing on it, which covers the other 2 screws that hold the switches in place. So we need to remove the safety lockout on the switch, and then we can lift that part of the panel off of there. Like so. And then there are, like I said, 4 screws that hold the switches in place. There's 2 above each switch, and then there's 2 below each switch, but you have to flip the switches up to get to them, like so. And then the switches will just fall through, and there's your panel. Now, these wires coming from the switches are routed around a roll pin that's inside the head casting. So the switches are too big to make it through there. So you're going to have to unplug all the wires on these switches. And I recommend you mark each one of those wires so you know where to reconnect all that after the fact. But once we've got all of them marked, then we can go ahead and route them past that roll pin on the inside and out of the head casting. like that. So next we'll disassemble the power panel. And of course, everything is nice and rusted, so nothing wants to move. You can see the receptacle there. That's where you plug in the motor. But there's one screw that holds the light socket or the lamp in place. And that'll just fall away. And then you've got two screws in the center that have got nuts on the back side of them. And those are the grounds. And once we get those two nuts off of there, and they may even have a lock washer under them, then we'll go ahead and remove the two screws. And then I think I've got a lock washer kind of stuck there. Yeah, there you go. So next we'll go ahead and undo this plastic clip that holds your wiring harness together. And get all those wires exposed. So if this is the first time you've ever done something like this, you might want to lay that stuff out so you can kind of tell what goes where and take some pictures. That way you're not like playing the guessing game when you go to reassemble everything. So there is a plastic wire stress relief right here that we're just going to squeeze with the pliers, and that should allow us to pull it through the power panel. And then we can just undo that moving portion of it right there, and then slide it off of the power cable. Next, we can go ahead and remove that plastic clip that held the wiring harness in place. So we'll just squeeze the prongs of it together and then push it through. Like so. And we're going to have to actually cut a couple of these wires to be able to disassemble everything. So I'm cutting them right at the terminal butt connector. That way I've got enough to be able to reconnect stuff after the fact. And be sure you mark all of your wires when you cut any of them or move any of them, so you know where they go. So to get the power cord out, we got to cut a white one as well. And that allows us to move the power cord. And I end up marking that, but I end up cutting those wires again because I have to cut another white to be able to get the receptacle out. So the receptacle has two clips on each side and they're metal. So you can try to squeeze them with a pair of pliers, but that doesn't always work. Really, the best thing is just to get a flat tip and push one side in and then dislodge that side and then do the same with the other side. And then you should be able to push it through the power panel. And we're still connected to the light socket, so that one white wire right there is connected to the light socket. So we're just going to cut it from the power panel. That way we can slide the receptacle out. Boom. And we'll remark those wires so we know where they go. And I may do a wiring diagram kind of like I did on the last video series to kind of show you where all this goes, but really if you just take some pictures before you start tearing stuff apart and cutting wires, you should be fine. And there's the power panel. Next, we're going to be disassembling the belt cover. So it has 2 screws on the top, and they hold one of the brackets inside. There it is. And then to get the, I don't know what you call this side of the, it acts like a nut, but it's what the screws go into. You have to expand it to get it off of that bracket. I don't know. Let's look at the parts diagram and see if they have a name for it. In the parts diagram, it's called a clamp. So I'll also have a link in the description of this video for the owner's manual for this drill press that has the parts diagram in it, as well as an owner's manual for the motor, which has a parts diagram as well. But like I said, you just need to expand those clamps enough that you can get them off of that bracket, like so. You'll do the same for the other one. Now, to get to the other bracket, we've got to remove this front panel. And just like the panel that was on the hub, this one is glued in place. So as soon as we can get that scraper up under it, we can dislodge it. Hopefully we don't bend it up too much. And there it goes. Under that, there are 4 screws, and those 4 screws hold the other bracket on the inside. There's a clamp on the inside that those screws are screwing into. Like so. So next we need to remove the data panels that are on the head casting, and they are all held on by drive screws, and there are 4 for each side right there. There's 2 on the model number panel, that's a small one on the back, and for that you need a 16-inch punch, 1/16 of an inch punch, and a hammer. But I fabricated this stuff because all my punches and hammers and stuff are kind of too big to get into here. So removing the 2 top drive panel screws or drive screws is fairly simple for each one of these side panels. But removing the 2 lower ones is a real pain in the butt. Sorry for my head being in the way. So I have successfully removed them from the Gen 4 that I rebuilt for myself, and both of the commercial Gen 4s that I did, but these are really rusted in here, and you can kind of see it's kind of glowing right there, but getting to them is very, very difficult. So the alternate method will be to cut them out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So here I'm going to drive the data panel or the model number panel screws out. Then once we've got them kind of out, we can grab them with a pair of pliers and pull that model number off. So to remove these, I'm going to put some tape around them, and I'm just using a small punch to expose the head of the drive screw through this tape. The tape is going to help mask the panel so that we don't mar it up too badly. And then we're going to use a cutoff wheel from a Dremel, and we're just going to be putting a slot straight down the center of the head so that we can unscrew it as if it's a flathead screw. Now this works about 50% of the time for me. 50% of the time I'm able to get the slot perfectly in the center and back that screw out of there with a flat tip screwdriver. The other 50% of the time, half of the head will break off. And then I have to get rid of the other half of the head and lift the panel off of the head casting, which is not a problem. Either way, we can get the panels off the head casting. And you're thinking, well, we're going to have part of that drive screw still stuck in the hole then. And we can drive that drive screw straight through the head casting and out into the inside of the head casting. Because the holes for these drive screws go all the way through the head casting. And in this instance, what happened is, or what will happen is, the heads are just going to break off of these drive screws. Like that head just broke off of there. No big deal. We'll get the rest of it out of there in a minute. So we'll try to do the same thing with this drive screw, and we're going to do the other side the exact same way. If you've got a relatively safe way of just removing the heads and then punching the remains of the drive screw into the head casting, you know, by all means, go for it. And that's me turning red. So, same thing happened again. The head broke off. Not a problem. We've got the panel off. And then we can just use a spring-loaded punch to start moving those, the remains of those drive screws through the hole that they're in. And once they're receding into the head casting just a little bit, then we can just use a 1/16 of an inch punch and punch them all the way through. There you go. Too easy. And that is what we're going to do for the other side as well. And then the last thing we need to do is remove the depth scale on the side of the head casting. It has 2 screws that hold it in place. And that is going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we'll be tearing apart the motor. So that should be interesting. And as always, I appreciate the support. If you've got questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. Be sure to check out the links that I've provided in the description of the video. And as always, I will see you next time.